And Minister, by reports that the perception against Britain is becoming against Bahrain, the perception in Britain against Bahrain is becoming rather negative. One witness rather likened the UK's position with Bahrain as Russia's with Syria. What's your reaction to that?
I think I've felt for some time that it's a complex situation which is not always faithfully recorded. I don't want to criticise the press because they report what they see, but anyone who's been to Bahrain, anyone who's been engaged in a period of time, knows that this is not a simple situation. They know there are people working for reform and change. They know that there are still things that go on that are wrong. The United Kingdom has set out its stall, and I make no apology for this, and I will be totally upfront. We think that the best chance for stability in Bahrain lies through the successful national dialogue process by Bahrainis, which will seek their own political settlement, which is highly likely to encompass the Al Khalifa leadership and the structure of Bahrain. And we think that Bahrainis should be given every encouragement to proceed with this and do all the bigger recommendations and the like. We do not ally ourselves to all the opposition to the Bahraini government because that varies. There is some opposition that we deal with, we work with, we listen to, and we believe are part of the solution. There are others that we think have taken to violence, that we will not sanction and not support. I have seen, as you must have seen, the evidence of those who assault some of the security forces now, the people who use the fire extinguishers, stuff the metal rods in them and fire them at the police. This is unacceptable, can't be justified, can't be excused. And I would want to see absolute condemnation of that sort of violence, which doesn't help in the process. At the same time, it's absolutely essential that security forces adhere to the highest possible standards. Now, I think that's a justified position for the United Kingdom. And I think if people look at the situation in Bahrain, they will see that it is complex, and the more you go into it, the more you understand the layers and should reflect it. For instance, the Grand Prix. The coverage of the Grand Prix and the protests leading up to the Grand Prix tended to wait for the protests to turn violent, which was usually at the end of a government-allowed protest, which was conducted peacefully by opposition forces, and then at the end it tended to get hijacked by a few, and that was what was reported, not the fact that peaceful protest was made and handled perfectly properly by those wanting to protest, as well as government authorities that allowed it. So the impression was gained of a population against the Grand Prix and the violence and everything else. I thought that didn't tell, for instance, the whole story. So I think that's my position on it. I think we're very clear about what we are trying to help achieve in Bahrain for all Bahrainis. I think sometimes the full picture isn't displayed. I don't mind facing up to the criticism for supporting the Bahraini authorities in trying to see through reform. I'm prepared to criticise them when they don't. And I think that that's the appropriate position for us to take. And if we take a reputational knock fairly, fine. I think sometimes it's a bit unfair. We do see opposition groups. The ambassador is meticulous in relation to that. We don't see people connected with violence, but we see the opposition. We see them at the embassy in Bahrain. We see them here. So we are trying to work through and be fair to all.
You say that the embassy in Bahrain meets opposition groups. We've had evidence that the British embassy is less accessible for opposition groups and human rights activists than other embassies. Is that a fair comment?
I've picked up one expression of concern in the witness statements, and we're not sure that we've actually had a request from that particular group to come to the embassy. But I'd look at any of them. My understanding, firstly, I've seen opposition groups in the embassy. I know the ambassador obviously, very well. I know that he would want to see and does see those involved in opposition because their involvement in the process is vital. The people he said he won't see and play a part with are clearly those who have supported or endorsed violence, and I think the committee would think that was fair. But I would be very keen to make sure that our embassy was open to all political groups, because that's where an embassy draws its information from that can inform us. And we'll look very carefully at that. But my sense was the particular group that expressed concern. We're not sure they've formally asked to see the ambassador there, but we do what we could.
Last topic before we wrap it up. In answer to a question from Mr. Gates, you mentioned Iran. Do you think Iran is interfering in the internal activities in Bahrain at the moment?
Yes, but I don't think that's a complete answer to all the issues. I'm very conscious that there are some in Bahrain who would like to see Iran as the source of all the problems. I don't think that's fair or correct. Our evidence has tended to suggest that after the events of February 2011, the Iranians were not active in Bahrain in instigating it, but they were well placed to exploit. The media that's beamed across from Bahrain is very significant. It plays into the Shia villages, and some of the material is not designed to be helpful or conducive to peace. We've had evidence more recently of some more active involvement on the ground, evidence which, alas, I'm not able to share. But my overall impression remains Iran can and does exploit the situation, but there are many issues in Bahrain which can be settled by Bahrainis between themselves, and it's not an excuse for the Bahraini authorities to say there is some engagement or involvement with the Iranians. The Iranians should leave off and allow Bahrainis to do their job, but the government and the authorities have got to do their job in seeing through this reform process. That is the most likely counterbalance to anything the Iranians might wish to do.
So you don't think Iran poses a serious security threat to Bahrain?
I think Iran poses a serious security threat to everybody, frankly, and I think allowed to run on with their nuclear threat and everything, that's certainly true. And evidence we have...
So you think they do pose as a serious threat to Bahrain?
They could do. I do not believe at the moment, I would suggest there's any evidence to say that they do. I will look to both colleagues, but could they in the future? Yes, they could. And have they been engaged? Yes, they have. But I am very keen to stress those. I'm not blaming the Iranians for what's happening in Bahrain. I think the committee have the sense. There's plenty the Bahraini government can and should be doing to follow on an extraordinary track that they set themselves, unique in the Gulf, and they should concentrate on that. Have I got the Iranians right?
I think you have. We've seen elsewhere a willingness of Iran to intervene and interfere, and they have done to a limited extent, Minister Scruggs, and they may well do again. And they can, should they choose, pose a significant threat. I think as of today, that they are not threatening the existence of Bahrain.
There's no sign of activity there as of today.
I hope that's not what I said, gentlemen.
No,
there is evidence of activity. Yes, I think there is evidence of that. It's not to the extent which we have seen Iran do in other countries, which would make it a more significant threat. But yes, there is activity.
Mike Gibbs.
You will confirm that Iran still does not recognise Bahrain as an independent state, has territorial claims, and believes that Bahrain is Iranian territory. Is that not the case?
I think their formal position is to accept it, but they will then, ministers of their government will sometimes express a claim.
Ahmadinejad and others have made statements in the past, have they not?
And also about other bits of the Gulf as well. There are other islands that they lay claim to as well. This is they're quite free in their expression of where their territorial range lies. But let us all hope that recent events, Mr. Chairman, might just move things in a different direction. Inshallah, as they say.
Minister, you mentioned national dialogue taking place in Bahrain.
Yes.
And